this panel, So You Want to Work with Kids. We want to give students an opportunity to learn more about the different careers that are out there, how they can make a difference in people's lives and maybe work with the youth in our society. And so I think this will be good for them to be able to go back and watch this video and learn from professionals in the industry. And so thank you very much from myself and Morningside. But if you could just introduce yourselves and talk about your job title and maybe a brief description of what you do and how you got there, that would be great.
So my name is Amy Hecht. I graduated from Morningside in 2007 with an undergrad in counseling psychology. Right now I am the clinical director for Foundations Mental Health Center. And there we do individual counseling. We do counseling with groups, with families, couples. And so Cassie is an intern, and so she is learning all of those things with us as well.
Yeah, so I'm Cassie Dickerson. I also graduated from Morningside in 2010 with my bachelor's in counseling psychology. So I'm at the end of my master's degree program, which will be in clinical mental health counseling. I am days from graduation, so just finishing up the intern process with Amy, and then we'll stay full-time at her practice.
That's awesome. Well, that's awesome and great to have two different perspectives, as someone that's been in the field for a little while and as someone that's kind of getting into that. Could you talk to me a little bit about what the day-to-day looks like? I'm sure it evolves. I know that it's different from time to time, but maybe speaking, Amy, a little bit about traditionally, what does that look like for a student looking at getting into that? And then if Cassie, when she's able, if Cassie, if you want to talk a little bit about what that grad school kind of looks like and that experience has been for you too, I think you both would have good perspectives.
Every day is a little bit different. We are able to set our schedules for clients around their work schedules, their school schedules, their family obligations. And so we're able to kind of meet them where they're at. We do sometimes do a telehealth platform, which is very similar to kind of a video FaceTime type of conference. We just use a HIPAA compliant platform. So sometimes we can do it that way. Otherwise, we do sessions in the office. But every appointment is different. Some days you know what you're getting into. Other days you might have a lot of crisis type stuff come in, and so it can really just kind of keep you on your toes. We work with a variety of age groups, little kiddos as young as like 2, all the way up to the oldest client that I've worked with was in her 80s, and so very different types of appointments, very different methods that we use, and so. You know, I could be doing art and play therapy 1 hour, and then the next hour just sitting face to face and visiting with somebody. So there's not really kind of a everyday sameness for it, and so that's what's nice. Is it kind of gives you variety and keeps you on your toes.
Yeah, I mean, coming into it as an intern, I've done my full intern experience with Amy. And I chose the private practice because that's kind of like my end goal that's the setting I chose that I wanted to work in. But that's really one of the first things I noticed was that there really isn't, I think sometimes you have this perspective going in that it's just back to back, like sitting across from someone on a couch. And it's very much not like that. Like she was saying, we've got kids, we do art therapy, we do all kinds of different projects with our kids just to keep them or kind of meet them where they are and what their interests are. And that's a big part of what we find out in the beginning. As far as like the master's work, I think we actually just had a conversation about this a little bit ago that I felt so prepared coming from my undergrad program at Morningside going into a grad program. Morningside really offered a lot of the hands-on like role play experience that our grad program at least required of us. And it was something that I noticed other students in my program didn't have from their undergrad program. And they hadn't done like the role play or like group work before. They had just, it was all textbook. So that was definitely something I came in feeling like I had a lot of experience with already just from my undergrad work at Morningside.
That's awesome. And it's something that I've heard actually from other students too. I've talked with some that are in a program as well right now going into school psychology, and
Mhm.
felt the same way, that they were really prepared. Can you talk to me a little bit about, you spoke obviously about some of the things we're doing in our classes, but what else could they do during their undergrad? What do you think would be really helpful for students right now to start taking those steps to learn about what they want to do? And Cassie, I think you have a good perspective as well because you didn't go directly into a master's program. And so what helped you make some of those decisions and ultimately where you wanted to go, and so that people can decide, yeah, I want to go out and start practicing, or I want to go directly into a graduate program.
I think for me, I think volunteer work helped. I know when I was at Morningside when I was in college, I did a lot with like Girls Inc. and Boys and Girls Home and places like that. Um, I guess I didn't really do a lot of volunteer work with like adult organizations. I did more with kids, but it still kind of gave me just that foot in the door to kind of get an idea of just what working with different populations was like. I had a few different job experiences after I left Morningside. I ended up working at Boys and Girls Home. I know that that's one place that's really good for bachelor's level students to get in with like the residential side of things.
I think Cassie really hit on it. Volunteering while you're doing your undergrad work is a really good way to get experience, whether it's working maybe with some of the elementary schools or middle schools, even something as simple as babysitting, because I think there's a lot of different dynamics that you can learn just by caring for somebody else's kids and kind of getting exposed that way too. Um, the biggest need right now that we see are for providers who work with kids. And so anything that you can do to kind of gain some exposure and working with kids, a variety of age groups, different backgrounds, all of that is really helpful. Um, and as far as like employment after bachelor's level, there's a lot of places that have some entry level type of thing, um, positions like you said, Boys and Girls Home, Girls Inc., places that work with at risk or other populations of kids. We actually have some bachelor's level positions in our office, and those providers provide behavioral health intervention services, and they do those in home with families that are qualified for the Medicaid program. So typically, you're lower income. They may be single family or single parent families, that sort of population. And those providers go in and teach skill building, things like communication skills, anger management, emotional regulation, conflict resolution, just kind of some basic everyday to day things that some of us take for granted of knowing. So any kind of exposure during your undergrad program is really helpful, volunteer or paid, either way.
Yeah. This question's a little off script, but I want to, I think it's important the more I think about this. These students a lot of times aren't positive where they want to go, what direction or what even this looks like, right? And so how would you suggest they make the decision or think about whether they want to go into private practice or work in a school system or work at a hospital? I mean, we all have these ideas of what mental health and what counselors and psychologists provide. These ideas, like how do you navigate that? How do you make those decisions? How do you learn about what opportunities there are that ultimately led you both to work or pursue the setting you are?
For me, when I first started out, this isn't the setting that I had in mind. And there's such a need for mental health just across the board that, you can start in one setting and, get exposed to others and make decisions to move into something different. So there's always places to grow. When you're starting to think about where do you want to start or what direction do you want to go, that's where that volunteering can become a really important piece. Even just making phone calls and asking just, to spend 10-15 minutes talking to somebody who's already in the field, doing internship in the undergrad program, anything like that, job shadowing, just to get some different exposure into some of the different settings, because you may have a really good idea, like this is the setting that I want to go into, and then get into it and be like, maybe it's not quite the fit that I wanted, or it's not quite what I was expecting. And so any kind of question and answer time that you can spend with anybody who's in the field is really good to start gathering some information.
Yeah, I would agree. I just back that up with, because that's kind of how I figured it out. I did not so much volunteer work, but after I graduated from Morningside, did work as a BHIS worker, which is what Amy was talking about earlier. And I did have some placements where I would go into the schools and meet with the kids. And it just wasn't, I mean, I was like, it wasn't the kids, it was just the setting. And like, I don't know, it was something about working in that setting. It just didn't fit for me. So I knew that like school counseling or going that route wasn't something I wanted to do. I know just from like personal experiences that I didn't really want to do like the community agency. I mean, I have like the utmost respect for the people that do, because they're so needed, especially I mean in times like right now.
Right.
It just wasn't the setting for me. I preferred something a little bit smaller and like kind of being able to, I guess, have more flexibility of my own, which I mean comes into play later. You have to kind of think about what you want for your whole life, not just what you want for your job. So for me, private practice is a little more appealing because I do have a child. So like she was saying earlier, we are able to meet our clients where they're at with like scheduling for their work schedules and their family schedules. That comes back on us too. And it's helpful to be able to do that around our own lives and our own schedules with family and kids and other responsibilities.
And that's an important thing to consider too, is the work-life balance. Whether you're working towards your undergrad, or maybe you're in your master's program, or even after, there's such a need for you to take care of yourself and to have a balance. And so for some people, they just know this particular setting really fits for me as a person. And there are some settings, like you mentioned, that you're just kind of like, that's not quite going to balance. And so really just kind of getting to know yourself, getting to know the fields that are out there will help you to kind of narrow some stuff down.
Yeah. No, I think that's great advice. What gets you excited for this work? Because I mean, for me, I think it's pretty heavy, and it could be emotionally draining. I would be a person, I struggle with taking work home and allowing that to affect me. And so I'm sure that can present its challenges, but also its highlights. Can either of you talk about, or both of you talk a little bit about that?
I think part of the excitement is every day's different. And so being able to get up and go to work and have some variety is really nice. It can be draining. That is definitely a thing that we talk about a lot, especially when you're doing an internship, because it can be heavy work, especially right now with the health crisis that's going on in the U.S. and around the world. Not only are your clients dealing with it, their extended families, as providers. And so that's challenging. And so knowing how to reach out and, take care of yourself is really important. But with that being said, just kind of your day-to-day stuff, just the challenge of everything's a little bit different is exciting in a sense. And you can work with a client. I'm thinking of one in particular that I've spent a lot of time with, a couple of years, and just kind of felt like, how much progress are we making? Are we really internalizing some of this? Are the families making changes? And then for one reason or another, services end, and you just kind of wonder, how much of a difference did we make? And you run into that person, or you run into that family later on. And I will never forget it. I was out shopping here in town, and this kid that I had worked with, obviously a few years older, came running down the aisle and just offered this great big hug and just said, "Thank you. I want to tell you how well things are going now." And for somebody that I was just questioning, how much did they internalize? How much, impact did I actually make? It was worth all of that time that I spent questioning how we did, just to have that one interaction and to hear the tools that they were using, even a couple of years later, and the progress that this person had made, and what they were doing with their life. And I think that's really, really neat to be able to hear that. And there's still just like the simple day-to-day rewarding things where you might get a parent and a child that come in like, "Hey, we haven't had any verbal outburst arguments this week," and they were arguing daily before when they came in. And so just those little things, it's like, okay, we're making a little bit of a difference in how these people, or how these kids, how these adults can function just day to day. And so any little bit, I think, is rewarding. I don't look for the great big grand things. It's all in the day to day and the progress that's made.
Yeah, I think I've definitely learned that, like, being in internship and working like in the field hands-on, is that it really is about the small steps and the little victories that you make with your clients. We're not thinking, when we start working with a client, we're not thinking about like what it'll take to get them discharged. We're thinking about like every little step it takes to meet whatever goals they have. And so I think while that can be one of our challenges, and when you don't feel like you're seeing big progress, it's also just one of the highlights of the job, is being able to like slow down and back up and see the little steps that they've made. That's definitely something that I've learned, I think.
Perfect. Well, the last question that I would have then is just any general tips, advice, anything that you would offer, resources that are even available. And this could be anything, whether you're looking to go into the field, or Cassie, as you were looking at the different master's programs or that decision-making process. Really, I mean, I'm just opening it up to anything that either of you think would be beneficial for Morningside students to hear.
I think, kind of goes back to what we talked about earlier. Volunteer, get involved in something related to a field that you're interested in, whether it's, working in the schools, or, like a Girls Inc., like an after school kind of program, anything like that. Get involved, kind of get your feet wet, start seeing, what are you interested, what are you not interested in. Reach out to alumni. There's a big network. Alex and Stacey Hayes both do a really good job of connecting us with students that want to talk. And so, come to our office, have coffee with us, ask us questions, let us kind of introduce you to, what our setting looks like, connect you with other people to see other settings. That's I think a really big deal, is just kind of getting in and talking with other people, for sure.
Yeah, I think I guess my advice, like coming from where I am right now, would be to just take your time. Like, I know you asked about getting into a master's program and stuff. Obviously, you heard me say I graduated from Morningside in 2010. So I took time off. I had a double major at Morningside, and so I took a couple years to figure out which path I wanted to take. And I started for a little bit on the other path, and it just didn't feel right. So I knew, and that's really the steps I took. I mean, I reached out to you because we were close while we were at Morningside, and that was really the step I took. I came back and I said, okay, who can I reach out to? Where are my connections? And and just kind of went from there. But I think it's important to take your time and not rush into anything because you feel like, okay, I graduated from college, now I have to do something and I have to go somewhere. So my advice would just be to like figure out what it is that you want to be doing and where you think you want to be long term, and let that kind of guide your decision making.
I think one other thing that kind of gets skimmed over sometimes is, if you're thinking about a field in counseling, start some counseling on your own. Whether it's career counseling, whether it's meeting with a mental health therapist, you don't have to have problems per se to start doing some counseling. Counselors can help you talk through some of the things that you're thinking about career wise, or what do I want to do with my life. But it's really nice to have the experience of sitting on the other side before you get into the professional side of it. And just knowing that, anybody that sits in the chairs that we do, we're human too, and we have, people that we talk to when things, get a little bit rough. But take advantage of an opportunity to actually experience it for yourself and to see, what does it feel like? What do I like about this? Maybe what don't I like about it? And really just take advantage of all the different opportunities that there are.
Perfect. Well, I can't thank the two of you enough. It's exciting to see our alumni going on and making such an impact in this world, and especially right here in Siouxland, to have each of you as a resource. So I thank you both very, very much, and we'll be in touch.
All right. Thanks,
Thank you.
Alex.